Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Lead Well Wednesdays, hosted by the Tailboard Misfits podcast. We've been gone for a couple of weeks, kind of took some time off for the holidays and Christmas and New Year's. So we hope you guys had a good Christmas. Hope you guys rung in the new year and y'all are doing good. And we're praying that you guys are achieving all your goals and working after them. And we're excited to be back with another episode. Today I got Brad back with me. And we're going to talk about some really good leadership stuff. Brad, how's it going, dude?
Good. Yeah, holidays were good for me. So glad to be back. Glad to hit it.
Yeah. So side note, Brad and I's fire department just changed to a 48-96 schedule. And we started off with a bang and both worked a 72. So we're both coming off a 72-hour shift. But I feel like the brains are ticking and we're going to give some good stuff today. One of the main things we're going to talk about today is a personal growth plan, a personal development plan, whatever you want to call it. Just how we're going to develop and implement a personal growth plan for you as a fireman, as a company officer, as a driver, as a father, a husband. We're just going to talk about some of the important pieces to that puzzle to be able to excel you to the next level in your life. And the meat and potatoes of this entire conversation is what we're calling the vision, the mission, and strategies. And so, Brad, what would you say the biggest misconception or the biggest differences or the biggest problem is when it comes to defining vision and mission?
Yeah, well, I think, and for me, I'm no exception. I think for a lot of years, I kind of got the two blended and wasn't able to maybe clearly define them in my head. I could define them on paper and kind of see how they were different, but actually, like, understanding and embodying those to be able to apply those to my life was a little ambiguous. And I think that's what I've found a lot of people run into is they kind of, and they do tend to overlap, but I think they differ widely. And understanding those concepts kind of gives you ammo into building them. And again, just like this podcast, like a mission of this podcast is to make things very practical and understandable so guys can put them into action and use them in their lives. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with vision. Let's start with vision. What is your personal definition of how you've gained some clarity on what vision is?
Yeah, so I think vision has a tendency in our culture to kind of precede mission intuitively. And what do I mean by that? So, vision, purely stated, I believe, is just that it's a vision, it's a picture, it's something that you see, it's something that you kind of picture in your head of something that you desire, something that you want, whether you see somebody walking down the street that's super fit and now you want to be super fit, or you see a fireman at your department that is doing really well and embodies the fireman that you want to be, and you see that, and it's kind of desire that you have to embody that. So I think purely stated, a vision is just something that you see. It's a what, right? It's yeah.
It's something that you want to obtain. It's in the future tense. It's nothing right now. It's just something that you see that you would like to become, that you'd like to achieve, something in the future, not presently right now.
Somewhere you want to go. Yeah.
Right. And so going into the mission side of things, what is your personal definition of or what you've come to realize when it comes to mission?
So simply stated, I think mission is the why. In leadership arenas, people say lead with the why. People have to understand what the why is. Yeah. So mission is why we do what we do. It's why we want what we want. Uh, the example I give, you see the guy walking down the street that's super fit, and you say, I want that. Okay. Well, I think you have to define why you want that. And when you define why, that is in and of itself your mission. That is the mission. When you see a fireman at your department that's doing really well, that's into the job that you want to embody, and you say, I want that, I think you have to define why you want that. And when you define that in and of itself is the mission. And I think we kind of get confused, and we kind of blend the two, and we see something that we desire. We're a fireman at the department. I see a fireman that's doing really, really well, and I want that. And so I start setting goals in place to obtain that, right? Okay, maybe I see that he trains all the time, so I'm going to train all the time. I see that he studies leadership, so I'm going to study leadership. And so we start to emulate that behavior. We start to embody that vision, which I think those are all good things. But oftentimes we find ourselves doing those things, embodying those things, and we fall off and we don't know why we fall off, or we find it difficult to maintain consistency, whether it's in fitness, whether it's in training, whether it's in whatever, right? Areas in your life, in your marriage, as a parent, whatever it is, we find it difficult to stay consistent. And I think the reason why I believe is because we haven't really defined why we want those things with crystal clear clarity. When you see something that you want, when you catch a vision, I think you have to be really honest with yourself and really clear as to why you want that. And it can't just be, okay, so I see a good fireman, right? So I catch the vision and I define, why do I want that? Well, there's an expectation to be a good fireman in your job, and there's an expectation to be good, and there's an expectation to be in the job, and maybe you believe some of those things. But I feel like that's pretty superficial. And I feel like when you talk about mission, like, you have to truly believe, and you have to truly, like, get deep and understand, like, okay, why do I want to be that fireman? Why do I want to be into the job? Is it because I want to look good for people? Is it because I want the perception of being a good fireman? Because at the end of the day, perception and pleasing people, with my belief system, it's very empty and it's void. So when you start creating goals and strategy to accomplish that, like, it's hard to stay consistent in that. But if you can get super deep into your why do you want to be an into the job fireman? And it's to hold a higher standard of yourself, to to serve people, to love people well. I think when you get deep and you're honest with yourself, it actually makes it much easier to stay consistent when we start getting in the day to day. Yeah, so I think the vision and mission kind of gets blended together. Like, okay, it's the what and why. Yeah, but I think they're, even though they coincide, like, they're very different. And when you understand that, I think that's what really gives you ammo to be able to be consistent in the day to day when you start building goals and strategy to accomplish what you want. So
Yeah, and we were talking about this obviously yesterday, and one of the things that just stuck out to me, and it kind of made me think about it, is like, if you can take a step back and, like, okay, you see the fit guy walking down the road, right? And you're like, I want to be that guy. Like, I want to be super fit, right? And you start trying to break down, well, why do I want to be that way? Well, if it doesn't directly align with, and your words were like, what makes you tick, like, it's just not going to stick, right? And we said, oftentimes we fail our visions because they're not deeply rooted in their mission, right? And that's just saying, like, the vision is just something we saw that we want to obtain, but we haven't accurately defined, like, why we want to get there. And we haven't, like, actually sat down and figured out, like, if this is actually a priority for us and the reasons why. Because something else that I was thinking about was, when it comes to your mission, if you're having trouble and trying to figure out, like, why you want to obtain that vision. Like, for me, in the person that I am, if I'm having trouble defining something like that, it's because it's not really aligned with my priorities, or it's because I'm not wanting to be honest with myself about it being self-serving or, looking good for other people. Like, oftentimes I can try to make my way around those things. And that, for me, because I'm aware of those things at this point in my life, like, kind of starts setting off some red flags in my head of be like, hey, like, this isn't rooted in the right way. Like, you want this for a different reason. As bad as I want to go run like a 1,000-mile race or something like that, like, why do I want to do that? Like, I couldn't accurately define that besides just saying that I did it. And so I would never really be able to achieve that just because it's not deeply rooted in the why. So, was there anything else with mission, or do you have anything with that one? Just because I want to make sure that people understand that crystal clear. And I think we did a good job at it, or you did a good job at it, between vision and mission.
yeah, so just to sum it up, I think walking into understanding mission, vision, and then strategies kind of like is kind of the way people have broken it down. Just realize that you can start setting things in motion for your life when we talk about growth and development by starting with the why, by starting with the mission. If you understand, and I think that's a good place to start. but also realizing that sometimes you see something, right, that you want to embody, and that is a vision, right? And you, once you catch that vision before you set out on the mission, on the goal to accomplish it, like, you have to understand your why behind it. Why do I want to achieve that goal? Why do I want to be into the job fireman? Why do I want to be a good parent? Why do I want to do all these things? And not just keep it surface level. Be honest with yourself and get deep. And a lot of the times, like you said, it comes back to, is this self-serving or is this serving others? And a lot of the time I found when I'm doing things that serve others, it's much easier to stay consistent.
Mm.
And not always, and especially given the context, but yeah, just understand that the mission is the why, the vision is the what, and then strategies is how you execute that. So just be crystal clear in why you're doing things,
Yeah.
and honest with yourself before you set out to do things.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat it with a dead horse, but something for me that I feel like is important for you guys that are listening is just, and we've said it 100 times already in this short 10 minutes, but just really be honest with yourself about the why. Because like we just said, we're going to fail our visions if they're not deeply rooted in their missions. And then when we talk about strategies, just going along with some of the examples you had already given, like, if you see that fit guy, like, these are just actionable steps, right? They're habits that you perform to achieve, that align with your mission to achieve your vision. And so you just kind of have to break those down and set, I don't know if you guys have ever read the Atomic Habits, but he talks about making them easy, right? Like, you have to make those habits easy and build on them at 1% at a time. Just make sure you're moving forward towards your vision while still aligning with your mission. So we're going to kind of talk about still using this vision, mission, and strategies, but in the firehouse, and what it looks like to use those at the company level as a leader in the firehouse. So Brad, I don't know if you have personal examples or you just want to talk about, like, what that looks like as a leader in the firehouse to implement this vision, mission, and strategies tactic, if you will, to help get your crew to where you want to go.
Yeah, so obviously, anytime you want to create change, it's always easier and more effective, I think, when you have formal rank and power and authority to be able to execute that. If you're a company officer, you have that authority to exercise that over your crew and build a vision, and lead with the why, explain why we're doing things, and then execute the strategy, come up with goals and a plan to do that. But as a subordinate, if you will, as a driver or a firefighter, I want to empower you and let you know that can still be done. You don't have to be a company officer to create change, to cast vision and help people understand why we're doing things. So I think, for one, recognizing, like we've stated throughout this, that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And if you have people that you influence and people that follow you, I think it's much easier to execute those things. I've found that people in general, and the firehouse obviously is no exception, people tend to gravitate towards the leader oftentimes before they necessarily gravitate towards the mission or the why or even the vision, really. And a lot of times that comes from people getting a vision of what they want to be. They see something in somebody that they want to embody, so it gravitates them towards that leader. And that's how you create influence. So now you have that person's influence. So at the firehouse, I'm a driver, but even as a firefighter, if you have the influence of the guys at your house, of your company officer, I think it's much easier to kind of execute things and make things happen that you would like to see. I know we use training a lot because it seems like in a lot of firehouses, it's kind of a tough road to manage. But if I want to train more as a driver, as a firefighter in my firehouse, and maybe my company officers, vision doesn't align with that, the priorities of the day don't align with that, how do I start to create that change? Well, it starts with influence, okay? And then I have to catch a vision of what that looks like in my firehouse. I have to think about, what does it look like for us to train to the level that I want to. And before I start setting goals, again, we have to be clear in the why. Why do I want to do that? And it has to be crystal clear in my head as to why I want to execute that. So that way I can lead with the why when I explain things to maybe my company officer or the guys that are in my influence and get them to understand why we are going to train more. Why are we going to do this? Because if I just catch a vision and then I start setting things in motion to make it happen, if guys don't understand why we're doing it, then they're not going to be bought in. They have to know why. And it has to be deep. You have to be honest with yourself, right? If it's selfish in nature, well, I want to train more at the firehouse because I want to be better. And it's really not rooted in making others around you better. You're not going to get buy-in. So I think being honest with the why and leading with the why, explaining everything you're doing as to, hey, this is why we're going to train more. There's an expectation from the citizens that we're going to be good at our job. When we're not good at our job, it falls, the failure falls on them, not just us. So, and that's kind of superficial, like go in deep and just be mindful at all times that people need to be reminded of why they're doing what they're doing. Right. Because when you start setting plan in motion, you start setting strategy in motion and you get in the mundane of the everyday, bro, I don't want to train today. Well, if they understand the why and you can remind them of the why, you'll start to get that buy-in. Yeah.
And whenever you do that, like the motivation aspect of it is just not there because it's just second nature. You don't have to be motivated to do those things because that's just the expectation and that's the standard. Part of this whole podcast is giving people practical examples. And while you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking, like, let's almost give like a I don't want to use these words, but I'm going to, like, let's do like a role play type of scenario to where you and I are on the same crew. We've kind of walked through this, if you will. A lot of it was already pre-established before you and I got there, but nonetheless, like our personal crew, we're blessed to work with some really good dudes. Our captain's awesome, battalion chief's awesome. The other driver and firefighter, they're both great. Like, so it was more easier for us to do so. But what I would say is there was still a point in this crew's history prior to you and me where this had to have happened to establish what the way that we operate at this point. And so the common example you hear people is we want to be the crew that when we show up on scene, the battalion chief sees us and he gives us the difficult job. He entrusts us to do the job that he needs done right then and there, and he knows it's going to be executed perfectly. So if that's the vision that we want to get, right? If that's the level of the crew that we want to be at, let's walk through how we would do that and present that to the crew. Even we don't even have to say that we're the company officer. You're the engine operator. You're the engine driver. How are we going to make this happen utilizing this vision, mission, and strategies? Like practical examples.
So we catch a vision, right? You say, hey, we want to be that company. We want to be that company that shows up on scene and gets work. Again, anytime you catch a vision, you got to define why. Why do we want that? Why do we want to do that? And to be honest with you, like I know it's anecdotal and kind of our personal experience, but it's because we care. We care. We value good firemanship. We value training. We value citizens first mentality. We value aggressive fire tactics. We value all those things. And we know that when you value those things and you hold those things, you hold people above self, you hold the mission above self, and you do those things, you know that the fire's going to go out quick. Things on the fire ground are going to get executed well. And so when that's the why, then you understand you have meat behind the mission, the vision. It's rooted in the right place. And so when you start executing those things at the day to day, that's your why. You understand why, and you understand that is how we are going to be that fire company. So when you start setting strategy in motion and you ask what are some practical steps of doing that, I think you have to be consistent in the day to day, and you have to understand your why you're doing things, which is, okay, we're going to hold training to a high standard. We're going to put ourselves through the ringer and make sure that we're worth our salt. So when that day comes, when we're called upon, we can execute. Mm-hmm. We're going to hold training over recliner time or whatever it is, or, we're going to come together as a company, crew integrity and crew morale and making sure that there's no weak links, right? If we find a deficiency within the company, whether it be an individual's deficiency in education or training, like we're going to exploit that and we're going to make them better, right? We want to operate as a unit and function well as a unit. So, we can think about more practical steps, but as far as executing it, you got to understand.
Yeah. And so the big thing that I wanted to just get across is just like, okay, this is how it's implemented. This is how it can, people can listen to this and they can see, like, this is how it's done, right? We're not just saying you got to get a vision, you just have to know the why and then follow the strategies. So if we want to be that company, okay, and that's the vision, we just talked about the mission. We understand our why. Bounce that across your crew and say, like, why do we want to be that company? Is it for selfish, for glorification from the other crews because they're going to see us getting all this work and it handed down to the battalion chief? Actually, what's going to happen is firemen are going to talk shit. But what it really is like they could see us, they know that we know our stuff, and then they know that that's why the battalion chief's handing us these assignments, if you will. So what are the steps that we could take to get to that point? Well, it's, like you said, train. But what does training look like? Well, we're going to be proficient in the basics. And then when we're proficient in the basics, then we're going to move on and we're going to start working on some more quote unquote advanced stuff, some extended stretches, some vertical stretches, right? Throwing ladders, splicing ladders, some just making sure that first and foremost we are rooted in the basics and we're well performed in the basics, and then making sure that we account for some of the not so high frequency but the higher, more risk, involved in it, scenarios and techniques, if you will. So I was just trying to give the people that are listening, like, just something that sounds like something that we have done, something that we have put into place and rolled in.
Yeah. So I think before, and I don't remember the quote exactly, but it's something along the lines of, I said this to you the other day, before you can lead, like if you can't lead a group of one, you'll never lead none. Meaning you have to be able to lead yourself first before people will follow you, right? So if you want to be the company that gets called on to do work, by the battalion chief, and you want to be that company, well, you're saying you want to go somewhere where you're currently not. So let's say right now you're not that company and you want to obtain that. Well, you got to be able to lead yourself well first. Because if I can't lead myself well first, then I'm not going to have the influence of my crew, whether I am a firefighter, driver, and even company officer, honestly. So you have to make sure that you're leading yourself well first and you understand why first. And then you have to vet the company and make sure that they understand the why. And then second to that, they have to be bought in. If your crew is not bought into that, you are going to fight every single day, that one, two, or all individuals, to create that vision. So if you cast a vision to be that company, but the guys on, and you lead with the why, you explain why we're doing this, and the men don't buy in, then it's never going to be that. You have to be of like-minded people. But if they do buy in, right, and then you want to start obtaining those practical steps to accomplishing that, then yeah, it's that, right? You have to train every day. You have to take physical fitness seriously. You have to take crew integrity seriously. You got to take care of each other. You have to start prioritizing your day, which practically speaking, training is a priority for us, right? We train. We're going to talk about stuff. We're going to do stuff every day. Every single day I come in the morning and one of us turns on the TV and it pisses the other shifts off, and I love it. We put on YouTube and we start looking at fires, man. And we just start talking about stuff, right? There's a constant just revolving in our firehouse of just talking shop, right? At any given time, there's fires on the TV, right? And we're talking about stuff. We're asking the battalion chief, hey, what would you do in this situation? Hey, Cap, what would you do in this situation? And we just get other people's opinions on things just to create that constant talk, right? We're always talking shop. And I love that. You create a culture where that's okay. You create a culture where it's okay to talk about firemanship. It's okay to be good into the job. Those are some of the practical things, I think. And then, yeah, what do we train on every day? Well, practically speaking, I think you have to train on the fundamentals of firemanship, right? What makes a professional a professional? They practice through boredom. They understand the fundamental skills of being a professional, and they do it over and over again. Michael Jordan, every practice, he practiced free throws. In my opinion, he is the GOAT, greatest of all time. And he practiced the fundamentals. If we were to be professionals at firefighting, then we have to practice the fundamentals. What are those? Stretching lines, forcing doors, throwing ladders, executing searches. You do those every shift, or build a training regimen where you guys are doing those every shift. And then, on the one off every few shifts, like do something fun that's kind of out of the norm. Like, okay, we're going to do a vertical extended stretch, right? Or whatever city that you live in, like whatever pertains to you. Okay, we're going to talk about hazmat stuff today, or we're going to talk about special operations stuff. We're going to do some rope stuff. Okay. And that's great. You need to make sure that you grease that wheel. But the fundamentals is that where the priority gets, right? Chief Scott
Right.
Thompson said, if you don't do something in 60 days, you're no longer proficient. If we want to be that company that gets called upon, then we need to be proficient in the basics, no question. So
Yeah.
build a training regimen where you're beating those.
Yeah. I want to hang out here for just a second, and it's kind of a side mission on this whole concept, but we're talking about getting the crew's buy-in to the vision and the mission, and understanding. I feel like it's pretty easy to get crew buy-in when it comes to a vision, right? We could go to any firehouse in America and cast a vision, and for the most part, if they're firemen, they're going to want to get there. But it's really hard to sell people on the why. Like why some people just don't quite grasp the why behind everything, right? And one of the things that I've loved about rereading Atomic Habits here at the beginning of the year, in there, James Clear talks about habits, obviously, and he's talking about habits are nothing more than an imitation. Like we're handed down this script from birth, right? We're imitating what our parents have emulated for us over the years, right? And talks about how habits are imitated by three different groups of people: the close, the many, and the powerful. And this is very implemental in the fire service, right? Because if you have that one oddball in your company that doesn't quite grasp it, right? Use this to your advantage. If the other ones are all on board, they're going to be influenced by the close, which is their crew, and the many, because it's going to be, whatever, 4 against 1, 5 against 1. And I don't want to say against, but 4 on this side and 1 that's not quite bought in yet. And so using that and knowing that, like, what does it take to get that 1 or 2 people really bought in? And have you had that experience? And like, what successes, or even if it's not your personal experience, just something that on getting that one person bought in that may have been on the fence about it, or just being successful and pushing them across the line?
Yeah. So like we're talking leadership 101, man. Like, so what you're basically saying on a grander scale is I don't have that individual's influence yet, right? I'm not leading them well yet. So I need to lead them, right? I need to gain that influence so I can gain that understanding. I think honestly, before I get into that, like just realizing, and I have walked through this, I'm sure we all have, like at the end of the day, and I'm not saying we write people off, right? People matter, right? You're a leader. You need to take care of people. But at the end of the day, there's going to be those guys that just don't buy in. They just don't buy in. And that's okay. You've tried to lead them well. You've explained things. They may even understand the why, and they just don't want to do it. And that's okay, right? Not that I agree with that, or maybe their reasonings behind it. But at the end of the day, if they don't buy in, they need to be replaced. And I'm not saying you got to say, hey, get lost, and maybe it comes down to that, but maybe you help them find a crew that where their priorities and values align, and it may not be on your crew. So just being honest with yourself, and don't just write people off out the gate. Like, do your due diligence as a leader to try and gain that influence and help them buy in. But at the end of the day, if you've done all the right things, and they don't buy in, then they have to go, because the quote, when the leader doesn't fix the problem, the leader becomes the problem. And sometimes those people are the problem to reaching that goal, that vision of where you want your company to go. So so getting them bought in, right? If we're going to start there, which I believe we should, we got to lead them well. We talk about, how do people buy into something that you buy into? Well, nobody cares how much you know, right? Until they know how much you care, right? The age old quote. So I have to start to value them. I start to have to understand them. I have to build rapport. I have to build relationship and get them to understand why we're doing things, after they know that I care about them. I care about their growth. I care about their progress, not just as a fireman, but as a man. And once they sense that, then then you'll have their ear. And then they tend to want to listen to the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we training every single day? Why do you guys want to train for an hour every shift, first thing in the morning? They start to listen. So I think it takes time, right? what's the quote? We overestimate what we can do in the long term, underestimate what we can do in the short term. Just realize stuff like that,
It's
especially when you're
opposite,
dealing
but
with huh?
I say it was opposite, but yes.
We overestimate what we can do in the long term, and
No, we
we
underestimate.
underestimate
Yeah,
what we
we
can do in the long
underestimate
term.
what we can do in the long term and overestimate what we can do in the short term.
Sorry, I need more coffee.
Same, same. It's
uh,
okay.
yeah. So when it talks when we're dealing with people, just realize that this stuff, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And yeah, do your due diligence as that leader. You don't have to be the boss. You can be the driver. You can be a fellow fireman. But just take the time to lead them well, and that's where you start to get buy-in. Right? They
Yeah,
have to feel valued. They're not gonna. What is it? People do a lot for a what, but they'll give their life for a why. Right? You gotta build that rapport to be able to give them that why. So
yeah. No, thanks for answering that, because I was sitting here thinking about it as we were talking about it. I'm like, this is such a good point to hit on when we're talking about this, just because, like, I'm glad you said that. Like, there are going to be the people that might understand it. They might just not be a good fit for your crew. You know what I mean? Like, you can do your due diligence and you can explain to them everything, and they might understand and still might not get on board. And I think Craig Rochelle says it best. Like, when you hit that point and you've poured into this person and they're just not grasping it, or really, and I don't want to say conforming in a bad way, but they're not conforming to the standards of the crew or even the department level. Really, like, there comes a point in a time where you have to say bye, and it's not screw you, see you later. It's, hey, we love you. This is just not a good fit, man. Like, this is it. So, okay. I think we kind of hit those good. So we're going to kind of move into, like, okay, the personal growth, establishing a personal growth plan, right? And what I would like to do is not just say, oh, use your vision and mission and strategies, right? But let's give people practical things. I want to give people list of books, list of podcasts, maybe even some firefighter conferences, right? So they can walk away from this, and if they don't have anything, they at least have a foundation set where they can start walking towards it. So let's just walk back to, say, 2-year firefighter Brad Conrado, okay? Or
wow.
just establish, just think in your mind, like, the point where you realized that growth was important, okay? And you started to realize about fire conferences and books and maybe even some leadership stuff or whatever. It doesn't have to be 2 year, it could be 1 year, even pre-firefighter Brad. But think about that time, and just what are maybe some books or some things that you did personally to start growing as first and foremost a man, but also as a fireman.
Yeah, so I think, like, obviously our whole life experience brings us to where we're at. As far as like a moment in time where I started to seek out leadership education and seek out into the job training, if you will. I think started with mentorship, right? Being with Stephen Winchell. I've talked about him before. You and I have talked about him. I would say start with seeking out mentors, right? Look for people that are into the job, people that embody the same mission that you embody, that are the same kind of people, and get on board with them. Ask them questions at your firehouse, at your department, even outside the department. I've got plenty of mentors outside of my fire department, but find good mentors and understand what makes them tick. Why are they the way that they are? What routines do they have? What books do they read? How do they grow and develop? I think that was the change for me. It was spending time with him and seeing how he operated and what he did, and started to embody some of those things and learn some of those things. Yeah, so I'd say that's a good place to start. Get good mentors, and we can talk about that. I think that's probably a podcast for another day, and how to
Agreed.
obtain and get mentors. But that's a good place to start. I would say, me personally, somewhere in that time, you're right, probably 2, 3, 4 year fireman. Just based on my experience in my department, just the lack of kind of effort that was poured into me to develop me as a fireman. I kind of wanted to do better for the next guy, and so that's kind of when I started to fall into the vein of leadership development. Probably the first podcast, which I know you've referenced it, first podcast that I got turned on to was the Craig Rochelle Leadership Podcast. Great podcast, small bite-sized chunks. He talks about leadership concepts, and I would start to learn those things, and I would start to embody them. Right, action or knowledge without action is useless. So I'd start putting some of those things into practice in my day to day, right? And not just in the firehouse, but when I got off work, at home, as a dad, as a husband, involved in my church, like I would start to embody those things and do those things. Reading, dude, leaders are readers. You got to be reading, man. You don't have to, read a book every week, but 10 pages right now is kind of what I'm doing. 10 pages a day, and just be consistent, man. Be consistent in your education, and doing those things. Do you want to get into different books and
Yeah,
stuff like
no,
that?
that's exactly. I want people to walk away from this part of this podcast and have, like, if they have nowhere to start, they just can go reference these books or buy these books or go listen to a podcast or go to a conference and look up the conference or whatever. That's what this part is about.
Okay, great. Yeah. So the Craig Rochelle podcast, as far as podcast goes, great podcast. The John Maxwell podcast, anything from John Maxwell. He's the GOAT when it comes to leadership. Talking about leadership development, anything John Maxwell. Let's see. Andy Stanley has been a big one for me. As far as books go, again, anything John Maxwell. There's so many out there. Steve Covey, the 7 habits of
Highly effective people.
that's it. Yep, that was one of the first books. It's a big book, so if you want to put that one later down on the list, I probably wouldn't be a problem. It's a big book, but let's see. Yeah, James Clear, Atomic Habits. I'd put that at the top of the list, man. That's such a good book as far as building routines, putting things that you want to do into practical use, building those habits. What else?
What about conferences? What maybe just like a
Yeah,
few or top 2, top 3 conferences you've been to, maybe good for someone just getting into that realm.
yeah. So one of the first leadership conferences that I ever went to was ODP with County Fire Tactics in Florida, Pensacola Beach. Kurt Isaacson, Officer Development Program, ODP. Awesome class, 5 days long, and it's all leadership. No hands-on, it's all classroom, but it's good stuff, man. So much good stuff. That was a good conference. Obviously, firemanship conference. Like, you're not going to go wrong. That probably the pinnacle of fire conferences. FDTN, right? Fire Department Training Network in Indianapolis. I've been twice. Amazing class. The leadership there, the instructors there, honestly, is the magic behind it. It's all live fire training, all skills-based training. They teach you so much. But the instructors there, again, is what makes it so awesome. The levels of instructor: Bob Pressler, Tim Klett, Sandy, McCormick. There's so many good dudes up there that are teaching you how to do this stuff. Mile High Conference, great conference. First fire conference I ever went to, Lone Star Fools. The work conference down in Austin, that was great. Did Nozzle Forward 2.0. That was a good class. What else?
Dude, that was like a hard flex with the FDTN.
Yeah, dude, it was awesome. Yeah, dude, the Disneyland of firefighting. If you can go there, it's expensive. See if you can find a way to help your department pay for it if that's a thing. If not, dude, it's worth every penny. If you save up and pay for it, it will be money well spent, and you will not be let down.
Yeah, no, and I would just, just to give my 2 cents on that, like, I want to just almost mirror exactly what you said, because the first step for me was really mentorship in a way. Guys like yourself, and even, Winchell in a way. Other guys like Brad Peden and Bill Duncan, like guys like that, like really poured into me as a new guy and kind of had no issues setting me straight when it needed to happen, yourself included, and just being surrounded by those guys. And then, like, okay, these people care about me. So kind of like we've already talked about, like, just built the relationship and able to have that mentorship available for me has been very helpful. And then as far as like conferences go, for me personally, like, if you haven't been to Nozzle Forward, no, it's not a conference, but it's a class where you're going to go meet a lot of other firemen. And it's probably one of the better classes you can go to as it pertains to being a nozzleman. I would go to that class. And then some of the other ones that you said, firemanship, like that one's awesome. Some of the more local ones here in Texas have been great. Dagum, the For Them, like all those were awesome. And I will definitely go back to those. As far as books go, I am reading a book right now that I think is super helpful as it pertains to being part of a crew. And I believe it's called The 17. I don't know. It's a Maxwell book, so he's got this long title, but it's talking about being a team player. The 17 characteristics of being an ideal team player, or something like that. And it is really, really good. and then I would mimic that. Atomic habits, atomic habits, atomic habits. It's so helpful in understanding it.
Oh, I got
and
one. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Bro, you got to.
That's a
It's a
good
good
one.
one. It's a
That's
good
a
one,
good one.
man. How
That's
to
a
deal
good
with people, how to show people value. Really, really,
Yeah.
really good book.
And then if you're starting, and I would just say, like, you just listen to this, just stumbled across this, and you're just starting out, a book that really kind of propelled me forward on this whole process, and it happened way before I even realized what was happening, was Extreme Ownership by Jocko. Like, I could go back and read that book right now, and it's probably not going to affect me as much as it once did. But like, if you're starting at ground zero, that is a great place to start, because it's easy to read and it helps you just really understand that, like, you are responsible for yourself. It talks a lot about leading yourself. So, and like we talked about, if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead anybody else. So, yeah. And then there's so many fire service podcasts, this one included, the Scrap, National Fire Radio, the Student of the Game, all the podcasts that you guys, if you're listening to this, you probably know all the other ones as well. So just get involved in those things and start really putting yourself out there. One thing that I would encourage you to do, and it's a conversation I've had not too long ago, is like, okay, your fire department doesn't pay for your training. They won't send you to classes. And what I realized for me is, like, this was an easy concept for me to grab as far as paying for myself to go, because I grew up playing sports. I don't know if I had this conversation with you, but I grew up playing sports. And so what do you do when you play sports? You go to camps, baseball camps, football camps, all that stuff. Like, my family paid for that. The team I played for didn't. So it was just an easy concept. Like, oh, I want to go to a fire conference. Like, I'm going to have to pay for that. And I don't mind doing that. But I would just encourage you to find ways to get your department to pay for it, or there's grants or whatever the case is, but really invest in yourself so you can really master your craft and just get better, make connections, all that good stuff. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Any more books, podcasts, conferences, anything we're missing?
Bro, there's so much.
I know.
I just want you guys to be honest with yourself when you guys seek this and start this journey of learning to lead well and what it looks like to lead well. The fact that you're listening to the podcast shows that you're actually digging in and trying to learn what it looks like to lead well. Just know it's a process, dude. I'm not the leader that I am today. John's not the leader he is today overnight. It didn't happen overnight. It's taken time. It's taken failure after failure after failure, after treating people like crap and learning how to not do that, after putting my selfish needs before others and learning how to not do that and seeing the impact of that. So I just say, as you start out on this journey, give yourself grace, and just know that it takes time, right? Just at its core, love people. I've always said, if a leader gets one thing right, you got to put people before yourself. If you're putting yourself and your needs before others, then you give no reason to be followed, right? All it is selfish gain. So put others first, do the right thing, and give yourself grace, man. It's hard. So
just to kind of wrap things up, kind of summarize things, guys, like, I want you guys to really, if you don't already, we in a previous episode, we talked about writing mission statements, right? Those are your whys, right? Now create a vision or cast a vision off of those missions that you've already written down, if you've already done that. Really, really try to make your vision be backed up by your mission, and then write out actionable steps to achieve that, right? And that's what the root of this is. If you can really wrap your head around vision, mission, and strategies, you can implement that into every single area of your life to grow, to be a better fireman, to be a better person, to be a better friend, father, husband, whatever the case is. You can really use that vision, mission, and strategies to really conquer anything. But just remember, your vision has to be rooted in your mission. So we'll be back again in a couple of weeks. Hopefully we got some more good content coming out your way. So just remember, the best leaders know the way, show the way, and go the way. Stay ready, stay humble, and we'll see you on the big one.
Yeah, let's take a trip. Just sit back and light a split.